Welcome, everyone. My name is Mario. I co-founded the Washtenaw chapter of Families Against Narcotics, and it's an honor to see everybody here. It's a bigger honor to introduce you in a few minutes to our special guest speaker, Lyle Prouse, who is virtually joining us from his home in the Peach State. Anybody who knows where that is? I think it's the Peach State. It's Georgia. So, so Lyle's joining us from Georgia, and share more about him in a second. So yeah, my name's Mario, and little bit about Washtenaw FAN. We offer services to people in recovery. Sober living scholarships, yoga for recovery, exercise for recovery, bus passes. Why do we offer bus passes? Because we polled people that provide care to people in recovery and asked what the biggest barrier was to providing them with the best care they could provide. And they said oftentimes they don't have wheels. So the way we solved that problem was to go buy bus passes from the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, and we give those out to those in need. So if you know anybody that needs a bus pass or any of the other things that we provide, sober living scholarships, just reach out to us through our website. Just Google Washtenaw FAN and you'll see how to get in touch with us. We're an email away. So one of the things we do is, and Brandon, if you could put the survey in the chat feature, please. We listen to folks that participate in our forums. And even if you don't participate in our forums, if you let us know that there's a subject that you'd like us to cover that we haven't yet, or if somebody around the country or world is doing something that's really saving lives as it pertains to the disease of addiction, let us know. And we'll go do the heavy lifting, try to reach out to that entity, that research scientist, that guest speaker. And if they're amenable to it, we'll Zoom them in, or get, if they can get here, if it's a local person, have them be a guest speaker. My point is, we pay attention to those surveys. So please take the time, if you're Zooming in or you're participating on live stream, please fill that out, because it matters to us what our community thinks about what we're doing out here to benefit the people in recovery and their families and friends. So I wanted to talk about briefly, anybody know Jim Irsay from the Indianapolis Colts? He owns it, okay? And so this guy is out there. Like, he's a very vocal person. He's been in and out of rehab, according to this article. And this is a quote from him, 15 times. And this is tied directly to our subject, the topic of our conversation today. And I'm just going to mention this, and then we're going to, if anybody wants to briefly share their story, we're going to go there. But this article just talks about, he's being interviewed by Andrea Kramer from HBO. And I think this aired just a few days ago. And he said, the article opens up, Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay has opened up further about his struggles with addiction, revealing in a recent interview that a past drug overdose stopped his breathing and almost killed him. Irsay, who has spoken candidly in the past about his battles with drugs and alcohol, made the revelation in an interview with Andrea Kramer for HBO's Real Sports. HBO teased the full interview with a clip published on social media Monday. And then he says this, quote, "My self-will had to be abandoned because my self-will was killing me," Irsay said. "The only way I could be helped was to surrender and give way, to become teachable and to give way to some power greater than me," unquote. Going to circle back to that when I introduce you to Lyle Prouse. But all cell phones, if you could put them on vibrate or shut them off, it would be awesome. Thank you for that. And what we do, we still have people filing in, which is great. I mentioned before we had a full house here that one of the things that through our surveys people let us know about is that during the pandemic they missed the most and got the most value from was to hear other people share their stories, that it made them feel less alone, that it made them more cognizant of the fact that other people are battling this disease. And that comforted them. So please get back to sharing your stories. You know, it's really hard during the pandemic. And in all candor, I can't believe we're still here through the pandemic because, you know, it's kind of brutal. There's nothing that beats me here and you guys there. And so with that in mind, just who has you got the mic? Okay, awesome. So we're going to go around for just a few minutes. And if anybody wants to just grab the mic and don't give your name, rank, serial, don't do anything like that, but just briefly explain why you're here and a little bit about your story. My story is that my son died. And I will never get used to saying that. I miss him. And when he died, he told me that the thing most beneficial to him wasn't all the fancy inpatient facilities or anything else that Dad's money was able to buy him. It was the community of support that he had. It was free. So I committed then to help people battle this insidious disease. That's my story.
Anyway, my name is Jermaine Atkins, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, as well as the owner of Any Length Sober Living. And I've been a part of Families Against Narcotics for, about 4 years now. And Mario is the one who introduced me to the group as well. But the reason why I come every time we have an in-person or Zoom meeting is because the same way that Mario, Tom, Angie, everyone says that I am a part of Families Against Narcotics, we're all a part of Families Against Narcotics. If you showed up tonight, you are a part of Families Against Narcotics, Washtenaw County. And the reason why that's so important, because this is one of the very few places in the whole recovery world that I've experienced where people in recovery get to meet the families that have been affected by active addiction and recovery, and professionals that work in the industry that helps to treat substance use disorder all get to come into one spot and talk and learn how we can become part of the solution and help each other. So that is why I come, and that's why I'll continue to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Jermaine.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Jim Carey. I've got I've been sober since April 7th of 1999. And the reason that I am here talking is because I would like to introduce myself to Lyle because he saved my life. He may not know that, but I was employed by Republic Airlines, who turned into Northwest Airlines. And I was a supervisor then when we lost 255. And I went through 2 crashes. To make a long story short, I was working when your incident happened. And that incident went through us and scared the hell out of a lot of us. And I was fired from my job in 1999. And I could not stop drinking or drugging. I had a very tough time surrendering. And the only way that I could finally surrender was reading Grounded in Treatment and reading your story and remembering exactly what happened and realizing I'm not alone. Because I remember that exact story, being there with you, if you will, and seeing you here and hearing exactly what happened to you and realizing God loved you, that you ended up in the left seat. It's incredible. And I'm just honored to be here with you. Thank you.
Lyle, are you hearing that?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Tara. I'm a grateful, recovering alcoholic and addict. And thank you for being so open and sharing what you've been through. My last relapse after long-term sobriety, I've relapsed after 4 years, after 7 years, and this last one was the worst of my life. I overdosed and died and had to be resuscitated, Narcan 4 times, and I do not want to take that for granted. I was given this gift of life one more time, and I do not want to take that for granted. I have 2 small children at home, 2 and 3 years old, that I almost made motherless. And I still haven't fully processed that. God willing, coming up on 6 months again, and need to do whatever it takes to ensure that I don't want to restart again. I don't want to reset my date. So thank you for this amazing program to reduce the shame. I think that's a large part of why many more of us don't come forward or get honest. I still don't feel honest or comfortable being honest at work. And I think it's because of the stigma and the shame associated with this disease. And that's the thing, it is truly a disease. So thank you truly to everyone for, being honest, sharing your stories and helping to reduce the stigma. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And stigma is a big thing for us. If you go to the FAN website, you'll see our stigma workbook that was co-authored by a professor from Ohio State University. Here we are on the eve of the biggest game in the last 10 years happening right here in Ann Arbor. But she's got her degree from U of M School of Social Work, and she has a dog named Maisie, okay? And it was co-authored by all of you, people in recovery, said, I want to get that thing and make it where it's readable for my people. And so there are vignettes, quotes from people in recovery on how the stigma of addiction affected them. So thank you for sharing your story. We're gonna move on through, and we're gonna have time for Q&A after. We might go a little over, just please bear with us, but I want to give Mr. Prouse as much time as he needs, because this is a critically important subject that we're covering. And I want to very quickly tell you how we came up with this. And I got to know Lyle Prouse about 2.5 years ago. Somebody told me to reach out to him and that he was an amazing speaker, a lot of knowledge, experience, and that he helps people. So I just kind of cold called him, sent him an email. And Lyle was our guest speaker about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I mean, it was amazing. It was an incredibly attended Zoom virtual meeting. And I was thinking, and our board was thinking, that it'd be great to have Lyle come back just before the end of the year to talk about gratitude, right? Holidays, being grateful. So I reached out to Lyle, who has become a friend of mine. And I said, hey, what day works for you? Want to have you come back. And we want to talk about gratitude. And of course, Lyle's always gracious. And he said, sure, we got that one down pat. And then I thought to myself, I wonder if there's a subject that Lyle would like to talk about that he thinks is important, not that I think is important. So I asked him, and I said, is there something that you'd like to talk about that doesn't get enough attention in recovery circles? And without any hesitation, he said, yeah, acceptance and surrender in recovery. And he told me just on Sunday when we were talking that without those two things, the rest of it doesn't happen. It can't happen. So then I asked him, boy, what are we going to title this presentation? And like poetry, I think this literally just rolled off his lips. He said, yeah, the longest distance that anyone in recovery is going to travel is between their head and their heart, the 18 inches between their head and the heart. So I want to talk about surrender and acceptance in recovery. And that's what this flyer is all about. So, Mr. Prouse, thank you for hanging in there with us. And I'd like to turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Mario. Thanks for having me. My name is Lyle and I'm an alcoholic. And I've enjoyed sitting here and watching. I've seen your emotion before when you speak of your son. Saw it again tonight. And I heard the responses to that. And I thought, that's what we do here. We speak the language of the heart, and we do it openly, unembarrassingly, and forthrightly. And that's always good to see. And especially for us guys who think we're kind of tough and John Wayne like, and we come in here and we learn that this is the place where we talk about feelings and we're not afraid to show them. So I thank you for doing that. First of all, I'm not an expert on anything. Certainly not on surrender and acceptance, although I've had my own personal experience with that. And I'll mention that I'm a member of a 12-step group, and I'm sure a lot of folks there are not. So some of the things that I talk about may not be easily relatable because of that. I've had 33 years in this 12-step group. So yeah, that's what I've been raised with. That's what has become embedded deeply within me. And that's, so I will be talking primarily from that. And I'll try to, if I get into areas that are not facts, but opinions, I'll try to discern from that, because all I have is what you talked about, which is that ESH, which is a very common expression within the 12-step group: experience, strength, and hope. And with regard to the surrender and acceptance, I've had my own personal experiences in that. Without detailing my own personal story, I'm going to thumbnail it. and say that I was the first airline pilot in American commercial aviation history to be arrested for flying a commercial airliner under the influence of alcohol. That happened on March the 8th of 1990, and I've been sober ever since. That was not part of my plan. That was not the way I thought I should end my life or my career or destroy my family or anything like that. I was born in Wichita, Kansas in September 1938, so I'm 85. Grew up in a World War II housing project on the edge of Wichita. It was a multicultural housing project, the blacks, whites, Hispanics, and a small Native American group. I was part of the Native American group, a mix of several different things, but the two parts that really love the alcohol are the Irish and Comanche parts. Both my parents died from alcoholism. There were two suicides in my family, an uncle and a cousin, one from alcohol, one from drugs. I've never done any drugs, not even experimentally, except for alcohol, which is a drug. But when I grew up in the 50s, it just wasn't popular. It had no appeal to me, so I don't have any moral high ground on that. I just never was interested. I didn't even smoke cigarettes, and but I sure did drink a lot. So I graduated high school when I was 17. I joined the Marine Corps a few months later, right after I just barely turned 18. I spent 11 and a half years in the Marine Corps, and I always excelled. And I always drank hard because I was always with hard drinkers. And that's my story for a long time, is that I was with people who drank like I did. And it took a long time for me to pull away from the crowd. I never thought I was going to be an alcoholic. Never once ever thought I was going to be an alcoholic. Was convinced I wouldn't. As a matter of fact, was working real hard to make sure I wouldn't, because I didn't do the things my parents did. I didn't behave like they did. I didn't drink like they did. And I thought that really made me different. But one of the things that I say the most in the program that I belong to is no one can know what they don't know. And I tell that to sponsees. You cannot know what you don't know until you know it. And I thought I had a fair inkling about what alcoholism was, but what I knew about was alcoholic behavior, nothing about the disease of alcoholism. That's already been mentioned, that it's in the DSM. It was in the DSM-4, and now it's in the DSM-5. Became a disease, I think, in 1956, and people still quarrel about that. They talk about the disease concept as if it's some kind of a hypothesis, when all of our medical science has firmly established indisputably that it's a disease. And unfortunately, for those of us with it, it headquarters in the most powerful organ in our body, my brain. And therein lies the rub. My brain, it's manifested in my body when I drink, but I have a brain that tells me I don't have it. I don't have a problem. And the worse I get, the more I'm convinced that I'll manage it. And to overcome that bastion of power that's in my brain, where I am convinced that I know that you don't know what you're talking about, is a monumental struggle. I've had an amazing journey in recovery. Northwest Airlines, which Jim Carrey referred to earlier, was the only major carrier that didn't have a program for alcoholic pilots. All the other carriers had a program called the HIMSS program, and it was highly successful, operated very quietly under the public's radar. And today, I think they're over, the record now, the number now is over 6,800 recovering alcoholic pilots who returned to the cockpits of America's airliners. And there's never been one single incident involving an accident or incident in any of those HIMSS pilots. And that's an astounding, just an astonishing statistic. It begs impossibility that could happen, but it stands true to this day. Northwest didn't have that, and they're not responsible for my alcoholism or anything I did. I'm fully responsible for that. But I did know, after watching what had happened to pilots over the years before my thing took place, that there was no coming back from this, and especially in the aftermath of my particular incident, which was 10 times worse than anything that I'd ever seen before in the pilot ranks. So I knew that it was over with. I don't have an education. I got into flight training going through the back door, taking some exams as an enlisted Marine, and received my gold wings and commission as a commissioned Marine Corps officer. with a high school education. I know there are others in there that had that same background. Don't know any of them, but I know that I'm not the only one who went through that program with no college whatsoever. But throughout my life, I've had a distinguished career. I've been fortunate. I escaped my background. As a matter of fact, I was in jail the other day of the jail meeting, and I remembered that one of the medical reports on me while I was in treatment, summarizing paragraph, said, given the history and background of this man, it's unlikely to believe he would ever be a productive member of society. And they took that from my family history and my background. And yet I've had the good blessing, the good fortunate to have had a successful journey through life. I had a distinguished combat record in Vietnam, one I was very proud of. And I have always done well. And so for me to be arrested, and with all the attendant publicity, I was the first pilot. So I generated massive amounts of publicity. Today, if a pilot's name shows up as being pulled out by TSA, you don't see him on day 2 of the news cycle. I stayed on for weeks and weeks and weeks. I made all the late night comics routines and monologues. Jay Leno called me in June of '96 with an apology, which is another story I don't have time for, but I was everywhere. And the massive publicity, the shame, the disgrace, and the dishonor just almost did me in. It's interesting now as I look back on it. When I was in 1975, I was ordered to attend recovery meetings for a year because I had a DWI in Minnesota. And when I talk about surrender and acceptance, I look back on this because I went to one of those meetings. I was there about 5 minutes and I was convinced, 5 minutes is all it took me, sitting there listening and watching people, that it was a cult. It was an absolute cult, and I certainly had no business there. And the people that I was listening to were fanatic, foaming at the mouth cult members. And I maintained that attitude for 15 years. I was ordered to see some counselors and some other people who tried to talk to me. I was convinced that they were completely off the wall, that they had no idea that I was not this, I was not that. And I was nowhere close to surrender or acceptance of anything except my own ideas about my drinking. I knew that I drank hard, but I thought so. Plenty of other people do. So it's no big deal. When this incident happened in 1990, it completely blew me apart. I mean, it destroyed everything within me, just devastated me. And the day after the arrest, I found myself in a treatment center, which again was modeled after the 12 steps. And finally, I got what I'm talking about tonight. I got the surrender, I got the acceptance. I didn't want any of it. But I couldn't deny, I could no longer deny what was there. It was right in front of me. But even intellectually, that's not enough. I have to move it from my head to my heart. I have to know. I have to know within the deepest depths within me what I am and what I've got. I've got this disease called alcoholism. And I'm fortunate because I'm the first person in my lineage to break that cycle. I'm alive. I've had a wonderful life for 33 years. I'm not dead. And I have a son who's also recovering now. But that surrender and acceptance did not come easily. And over the course of time, I've watched, I don't know how many alcoholics, hundreds and hundreds of people fail to get sober. 50 of my family and friends have died directly from this disease, even number 50. I no longer remember the names. I wish I'd written them down. But when it first began, I thought, I'll never forget so-and-so. And I've forgotten it, but I remember the number. And that number does not include people that I know casually in the recovery community whose funerals I've gone to because they've drank themselves to death or put a gun in their mouth or whatever it is. And I looked at this and I make a comment that I know is controversial because I hear people say, well, so poor old so-and-so, he or she just couldn't get sober. And people will take issue with this, and that's fine with me. I'm okay with it. I say it's not that they couldn't, it's that they wouldn't. Because we don't ask people to do things they can't do. We don't demand people have a Mensa IQ or Olympic athletic skills to get sober. I watch people with an 8th grade education who lived in a cardboard box under a bridge for years come out and get sober. But what happens is, in my view, we ask people to do things, especially in this 12-step program, that they're not going to do. There was not one of those 12 steps that I looked at that I was willing to do, that I thought was going to be fun, that I looked forward to. Every single one of those steps, which began with the very first one, saying that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I didn't have any trouble with the unmanageable part. But I talked to him and I said, and I wasn't in there fighting and resisting anymore. I wanted to go along with it. But I said, I don't like the word powerless. It means helpless, hopeless, and weak, and I'm none of those. And so they had to give me a visual. I said, suppose you drink a half a glass of Drano. The minute you swallow it, you're powerless over what's going to happen to you. And for some reason or other, that registered with me. And I had other vocabulary problems when they talked about things like humility and acceptance. I wasn't even sure what that was. But I know that acceptance is not compliance. Compliance is not acceptance. And until and unless I'm willing to set my ego aside, give it up, just stop it, and take information in and become open-minded. They told me when I got in there that they used the acronym HOW: honesty, open-minded, and willingness. And I immediately knew that my challenge was going to be open-minded, because I've got an instant opinion about everything, even though I don't have to know anything about it to be an authority. I don't have to hear the second part of your sentence because I've already got a response formulated. And for me to acquire some level of open-mindedness where I can look at things and set aside my bias and ignore the voices in my brain, the things that are telling me what I want to believe instead of what I need to believe based on what the reality actually is, I can't go anywhere. And I have watched, and I think that's why most people don't get sober, is that they just do not fully accept that first step. That I think if I just manage a little bit better, I can do this one more time. I know where I went wrong this time. I just have to manage better. And as long as I'm trying that, I'm going to continue to lose. So I have to accept the fact that I'm that one thing, that horrible word, alcoholic, which has all that shame and stigma attached to it, that nobody wants to. I think one of the toughest battles in my life was putting the word alcoholic in the same sentence as my name. And the first time I tried it, it took me 3 attempts. But I've learned that there's nothing for me to be ashamed of as a recovering alcoholic. The shame is reserved for those who know they have a problem, who see the damage they're causing and refuse to do anything about it. That's where the shame and the stigma goes. We just had our Birds of a Feather banquet last week, and they wanted me to meet this new chief pilot at Delta Airlines. And he stopped, I kind of forgot about it. He stopped me on the way out, and he was former Northwest pilot, and he knew who I was. And I'm so far away from those moments of shame and disgrace and dishonor at this point in time in my life. I still never quite comfortably accept compliments because I remember the shame. I remember the shame. But he said to me, he said, I want to thank you for what you've done for our industry. And that kind of hit me. And he said, now instead of looking down on alcoholic pilots, we look up to them. And he's talking about the recovering pilots that come back and become the best employees on the property. Every study that I've ever seen shows that recovering people on the property are the best employees that there are. They call in sick less, their production is greater. They have an attitude that is infectious in the workplace, and they have a sense of loyalty and gratitude that others just simply can't master. But this whole thing of becoming comfortable with the idea that I'm an alcoholic or an addict, same thing really. It's just that I'm an alcoholic, so I use that word. But the idea that I can be comfortable in my own skin as a recovering alcoholic, knowing that the example I can set is the only weapon I have against the stigma, the shame, and the disgrace and the dishonor. That when I have an opportunity, that when people look at me and they go, God, he's an alcoholic. But look at the life he's living. Look at what he's able to do. I can do anything on the face of this planet. I can climb mountains. I was flying airplanes until 2 years ago, still flying. I love to go hunting. Mario and I share that passion. I can climb mountains, I can swim rivers, I can do anything in this entire world except ingest a substance that's toxic to me, alcohol or any kind of a mood altering drug. That's a small price to pay for the life that I get to live. But I can never forget that I'm an alcoholic. I suffer from alcoholism, not alcoholism. And there's a couple of those. So every now and then I run across somebody in this program and they get high and mighty and they say, well, we use the word recovered, past tense, recovered, because it's used in our primary text several times. I don't care if they use that. I'm recovering. I will not be recovered until I'm in my coffin and I died sober. Then I will be recovered. I'm grateful for the fact that I know who I am. I'm grateful for the fact, I was a Marine fighter pilot. They don't enlist Marine fighter pilots based on their high level of humility. We're arrogant, egotistical. We think we're the best. We know we're the best. And I'm also Comanche. We fight till we die. We don't quit. We don't give up. There's nothing in my DNA that lends itself to the act of surrender. Nothing. And I'm probably a good example of a person who really, when it's all said and done and laid out, should never have been able to get sober. Based on my background, 11 and a half years in the Marine Corps, where I never even used the word surrender, much less even dance around it, where I believe that all I have to do to succeed is just keep trying. I will accomplish a mission no matter what. If at first you don't succeed, try again. The little train that could. Winners never quit. Quitters never win. And yet when I get here and I confront the issue of alcohol, I have got to learn how to surrender. There's a young Marine in a treatment center one day a few years ago. Said he was having trouble with that because of being a Marine. He was in the early 30s, had been to Iraq several times, Afghanistan several times. I said, you're right. We don't use the word surrender. It's anathema to us. But I said, surrender in recovery reverses itself. Surrender here is not about disgrace, shame, and dishonor. Surrender here is the very act that will restore your honor, your dignity, your self-esteem, and a purpose and reason for being alive. Only here will that happen, as far as I know. So I watch people come in, and I watch them battle this thing. And I feel sorry for them. And I don't know how to convince somebody to get past that monumental mountain and that gray matter, our brain, and so that they can finally surrender. There's some of it I remember laughing when I was brand new sober, and the guy said, treat your brain like it was a bad neighborhood, your mind like it's a bad neighborhood, never go in there all alone. And so I took the advice, and that's why I had a sponsor. That's why I did all the things that I'm supposed to do. For alcoholics and addicts, alcohol and drugs are not they're not our problem. They're our solution to the problem. They're our solution. And so when you simply extract those from us, when abstinence is not sobriety. Abstinence just means that I'm not drinking. Maybe I'm white knuckling it. Maybe I'm one of these people who falls prey to this myth of willpower. Just have more willpower. Just say no. When I happen to know that the part of the brain that the alcohol and drugs goes to first is the very part of the brain that controls my involuntary functions like breathing, eye blink, pulse, blood pressure. And that's where it goes. And I don't have any willpower over the part that controls my involuntary functions. And I've never seen anybody white knuckle sobriety and be successful. They may make it a year, may make it 2 years, may even make it 5 years. But eventually it doesn't work. And so I have to find something that will fill the hole that the alcohol and or the drugs has left and vacated. I've got to find something that addresses all of those areas. And that's what 12 Steps does. I believe there are other ways to get sober. I don't believe we have a corner on that market. Some people do it with church, but I have a strong belief. I know that I have a disease, and the disease is very much like diabetes. Once it's in place, it can never be cured. It can be arrested, and that's exactly what I've done. I've arrested it. We alcoholics use alcohol, then we abuse alcohol, and then 1 out of 5 of us slides across that gray blurred line into this disease called alcoholism. I'm one of the 5, and I'll guarantee you, I never thought it would be me. When I'm drinking with my buddies, it was always going to be the guy that was flunking the check ride, that was getting divorces and marrying flight attendants, that was calling in sick all the time, that was having trouble at home, legal trouble. I wasn't having any of those problems. It could not possibly have been me, and yet it was. Yet it was. And I'm real careful about how I say it, because I think it can cost credibility. It can put me in that same branded area as those fanatics that I first thought I saw when I first went to my first meeting. But I'll tell you something. Being an alcoholic has changed my life to the degree that it has forced me to do things through those 12 steps, none of which I wanted to do. It forced me to do things that has made my life infinitely better. Infinitely better. And I would never have done those voluntarily. I would never have done those voluntarily. I thought humility was a character defect. I thought it was a sign of weakness. There used to be a cartoon character named Casper Milquetoast. A little cartoon character walked around with a big black top hat on with a little rain cloud over his head. It was always raining on him. And I thought, that's what humility is. You go through life just being downtrodden and beaten. And I had to learn a new vocabulary when I went into treatment. That humility is a beautiful thing. It's an inner strength that says, I'm stronger than I ever was, but I don't have any reason to parade it or flaunt it. It's mine. It's internal. It's there. And I can use it when I need it. And I don't need to parade it or show it off. That's what humility is. And then I got to thinking about all the great Indian leaders that I knew about. This is so opposite from the Hollywood version. Every one of them was humble. Every one of them placed the good of the people ahead of their own personal self. And that's what we do in recovery. And that's what I heard tonight when Mario was talking and others were talking. The desire to help somebody else. And we say in the program that I'm in, the only way you can keep it is to give it away. And I will never be able to repay the debt I owe for the people who spent countless, endless hours just trying to piece me together, just trying to hold on to me. I don't know how I even got from event to event in the treatment center in those first days. I was so devastated. I was so blown apart. I don't even know how I got dressed. And yet I end up retiring as a 747 captain, reinstated by the president of the airline, a man I had never even seen or met. And when I retire, within a day or so, the judge who sent me to prison, who had strong feelings about my offense, and rightfully so, because I represented the worst example of the betrayal of the public trust that existed at that point in time. There was no one that did the damage that I did. And this judge saw that, and he had feelings about it, and justifiably so. And he came to me 2 days after my retirement through my attorney and said, I've never supported a petition for pardon in 16 years on the federal bench, but I'll support yours if you want to make the attempt, something I'd never even considered. And he wrote an emotional 3-page affidavit, a copy of which is over there in my safe, that I can't read all the way to page 3 without getting tears in my eyes. And I've read it 30, 35 times. 2 years later, I come walking in and I've got a presidential pardon from Bill Clinton. My chances of winning the national lottery are probably better than getting a presidential pardon. And for a federal felony conviction, that's massive. That's mega life-changing. And I've gotten to experience so much as a result of sobriety. None of it I saw coming. I had no reason to expect any of it. Never saw any of it coming. All I could do was stay sober one day at a time put one foot in front of the other and target the next right thing 1,000,000 times over. And these things came. That's through the grace of a loving God, a higher power, however you want to picture it or frame it or whatever you want. But I know that I didn't have the power. I wish I could write a book on how to surrender. I talked one day at Father Martin's Treatment Center out Ashley in Havre de Grace, Maryland, and I mentioned acceptance. One of the guys came up to me afterwards and said, well, how do you do acceptance? How do you move it from your head to your heart? And I said, I wish I could tell you. I wish I knew. I wish I could write down step 1, step 2, step 3, and the process for doing it. I don't know how to do it. I just know that it has to be done. I just know that I was able to do it, and I know that others do as well. But I can't instruct you on how to do it. I just know that it's vital. It's absolutely vital. And I think it's the very essence of self-conquest and the deepest level of honesty for me to acknowledge that I'm an alcoholic. I didn't want to be. And I've never told anybody that they're responsible for becoming an alcoholic, because I've never known anybody that set out to do that. I've never known anyone who took their first drink and said, this is so much fun, I think I'll just do it until I destroy my life, my career, my wife, my kids, my family, and everybody around me. I've never known anybody who did that. I've never known anybody who lit their first cigarette and says, I think I'll just do this until my lungs are perforated with cancer and I can die a horrible death. People don't set out to do those things. But what I do think I'm responsible for is doing something about it once it's pointed out to me. And once I see what's taking place. And I was fortunate. I took a hard hit, a really hard hit. But that's what was needed for me. And I'm convinced that anything less than what happened to me would not have been enough. And I have learned over time to say that I'm grateful for the things that happened to me, because without them, none of the rest of it could have happened for me. This whole process of recovery is so simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. We don't require a lot, but we require things that people are not willing to do. Not that they can't do them, they're just not willing to. I don't need a sponsor. I can read that book. I don't need to check with somebody before I do anything. I don't need that. I don't need to do the 12 steps. I'll do 1, 2, and 3, and 12. That's it. I'll do this. And I've told people when they come to me and they talk to me about about recovery, if you're still in the area of negotiating the terms of your own recovery, you're not ready. You probably just need to go drink a little bit more, and hopefully you won't kill yourself or somebody else or end up in prison. You know, I believed them when they said there are only 3 outcomes to alcoholism, and you can include addiction. It's the same thing. Sobered up, toes up, or locked up. I've had 2 of those. And now I get to live the life of being sober. The interesting thing, when I go to the jail at night, and I can see the resistance. You talk about acceptance and surrender. There are about 12 inmates in there right now. And I don't see either one of those 2 things in any of those people. But I'm not responsible for that. I just plant the seed and they have to make it grow. And I know every night when I leave that jail, every Monday night, that I'm probably going to stay sober that night, that I've done what I can. And it may be 5 years before somebody takes something that was said in there by me or the other guy, and it registers and resonates, and they can finally see. They can finally know what they couldn't know before. This is a great process, this recovery process. It's great to see a young son of mine who has 12 years sober, although frankly, to tell you, he's not doing the work. He's too busy. I've seen that before. I've seen that movie before. And so he's in a risk area. But again, it's his sobriety and not mine. And all I can do is take care of myself. I can be there for him if he wants to know. If he wants to ask questions, I can know. But I'm grateful that at least he's not drinking and drugging. Like I said, of all the people I know, I'm probably a prime candidate for not making it, not ever getting sober, because I'm too tough, too pig-headed, too arrogant, too egotistical, And I know I've got the answers, except for the fact that I've been through a process that has blown all that away. And I know that I don't know. I know that I continue to learn. And I like it. I was glad when I was 10 years sober that I didn't break into double digits, and they gave me a plaque and a certificate and said, well, you're all done. You've learned everything there is to know. You've been sober 10 years, and that's the end of our program. So go and sin no more and have a good life. I'm glad that didn't happen when I hit 20. And I'm glad it didn't happen when I hit 30. That this is a process that continues to bless me day in and day out. And it's something I never wanted. I never wanted to be part of this program. I never wanted to be within 1,000 miles of any of the people. And every time I go to an event or come back from an event, I look at my life and I think how blessed I am to have made the acquaintance and the friendship of a lot of these folks. It was something I would have missed the entire show if I could have done it my way. But I'm convinced that unless I surrender, unless I accept in the deepest part of my soul who I am and what I am, that I will not stay sober. And so I work on it every day. And coming here with you folks tonight is just another example of that. Like I say, I'm no expert on this. I just know what's worked for me. And I know what's worked for so many that I see around me, the thousands and thousands of alcoholics I've met all over the United States, in Canada. Barbara and I have been blessed to have been asked to go to Spain and England, Hong Kong, and Australia, New Zealand, and deal with alcoholics there. And they're saying they're all the same. We're all the same. We all deal with the same issues. So anyway, I don't know if I've said anything that has any value. Let me just look here. I made a couple of notes that I'm going to brain lock up there. Well, it looks like I pretty well hit what I was going to talk about. Anyway, I wish all of you solid sobriety. I hurt for those of you who've had tragedy in your family as a result of this disease. I've watched it. I've been to a lot of funerals. The other part of that is, and I guess I should probably talk about this. Sobriety and recovery does not guarantee us that the rest of our life is going to be butterflies and banquets. But sobriety and the program I belong to equips me to deal with life on life's terms, not mine, but life's terms, and to do it sober. And 2 years ago, I was sitting right exactly where I am right now, and I got a call from a neurologist. And he said, Lyle, he said, I have to tell you that Barbara's spinal fluid came back positive for Alzheimer's. And the bottom of my world just dropped out from under me. We've been married 60 years. She is the sweetest, kindest, gentlest, most loving person I've ever met in my life. She's never harmed another human soul that I've known or seen in 60 years. And I looked at that and I thought, thank God I'm sober. Thank God I'm sober. And I can be here for her. 100% available, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. She was here for me 33 years ago when I burned my life to the ground as I stood in the middle of it. And she never flinched. And now it's my turn to be here for her. And I can do that because I'm sober. And I don't do it alone. I have all these friends in this program I belong to. Friends all across the country. I get messages, we're praying for Barbara. And I know that I'm not alone. I watched people die under horrific circumstances and do it sober in the time that I've been sober. I watched one man lose a 6-year-old child and stay sober. You know, life happens. I've also seen people get angry at God and blame God. I saw just the other day on a Zoom meeting. And I thought, you know, God didn't create these things. Life happens. We live down here where we poison the land, the air, and the water. We eat stuff that's not good for us. We don't get the rest we need. We chase the almighty dollar. We stress out. We do all these things, and we collide with stuff, none of which is God's doing. And every one of my prayers begins with the word Father. And if I thought there was a father who treated his children so cruelly as to look down and say, I think I'll throw a little fatal, inflict a horrific disease on that innocent little baby just to see how the parents handle it, suffer. Or I look down there and see that pretty little Barbara Prouse. I think I'll just throw some Alzheimer's her way. If I believe that, and some people do, preordination or whatever, and you're welcome to it, I could never utter another prayer. And if I got angry at God, then he would become my problem. And he could never be my solution. So all these things that I have learned and been able to deal with and process have come through the program that I belong to. Has kept me sober for 33 years. And I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be a sober, recovering alcoholic. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for having me. And I wish all of you-
Awesome, Lyle. So we're gonna open it up for questions. Nobody's allowed to leave until they take a piece of cake, okay? Why don't we start cutting that right now while we're queuing up questions? But I wanted to say this, one of the, a few things. So if you have questions, put them in the chat feature. We'll also pass the microphone a lot, but I want to be courteous to the good folks at the 242 Church who allow us to use this amazing facility. So we kind of want to wrap it up within the next 20 or 30 minutes. But Lyle mentioned something about the pilots that have battled alcoholism, that somebody told them that they were the best on the property, the most conscientious, the most, okay. So it's interesting to note that the two meetings, that forums that FAN has hosted over the last 5.5 years, the two most participated, the three most, Lyle Prouse version, the first time we had him 2.5 years ago, this meeting with Lyle today, and Dr. Anna Lemke from Stanford, who is an addiction psychiatrist. And what she talked about was exactly what Lyle referenced, how those people in recovery, the pilots, were the best on the property. We were talking with Dr. Lemke about what we all have to learn from people in recovery. That was fascinating. And I hold people in recovery in very hard regard. People like Lyle, people like you who are here, because to pull through, you've done something. So do we have any? We don't have any. Does anybody want to ask a question live to Lyle? We've got a microphone. Anybody? And while we're handing that microphone over, I wanted everybody to know there's a book, Final Approach, Northwest Airlines Flight 650, Tragedy and Triumph, by our guest speaker, Lyle Prouse. If you want to learn how to order that, just ping us up through our website. We'll put you in touch. You can go to pretty much anywhere to get it. But if you're interested in that, just go through our website. We have an email address there, and we'll tell you where to get it from. Also, note that Washtenaw FAN is going to donate copies of that book to the library system in Washtenaw County. There's a system that you can use to go reserve a book. Sometimes there's a long wait. We're going through the process for, books that are most popular. Anyway, there's a long wait. And no doubt with the active recovery community in Washtenaw County, we're hoping there's a wait list to get a copy of Lyle's book. So to libraries that allow us to do it, we're going to donate to those libraries. Again, Final Approach, Northwest Airlines Flight 650, Tragedy and Triumph. And your question for Lyle Prouse.
Hi, Lyle. I'm Zachary. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Zachary.
What was your biggest struggle in early sobriety?
Oh, what a great question.
I think the hardest mountain I had to climb was self-forgiveness. I could not forgive myself. I couldn't get past that. I believed everything that I was being taught and told because I could see the truth in the eyes of the people who were doing that, all of whom were recovering, the doctors, the clinicians, the counselors. I mean, I didn't doubt anything that they were telling me. I just couldn't get past the shame. And finally, a counselor finally asked me one time, he said, "Can you forgive other people?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you think God can forgive you?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Then where do you fit in all of this? If you think God can do that, but you can't, you're not willing to." And again, like that, it just provoked a lot of thought. It didn't make it any easier for me, really. It just let me frame it a little bit differently. And it's taken time. It's really taken time. And I'll never forget the first time somebody said, "I'm proud of you." I thought, proud of me? How can anyone be proud of me? Look what I did. And then when that chief pilot said that the other night, I had the same reaction. So it was the self-forgiveness. I walked into a class in recovery that had just exited, and they'd left a writing on the board. And I saw it. It says, "Shame says that I'm a bad person. Guilt says that I'm a good person who's done some bad things." Little things like that, many of them, little things like that, helped me move past it a little bit. You know, and we had a tremendous amount of support from the pilots. The second week in prison, Barbara came in and laid to the visiting room, which is kind of a grim place, but she laid down a list of 9 names. And 2 of them, I just knew who they were. I'd probably spoken to them, but I didn't know them personally. I said, "What's that?" She said, "Those are 9 of your fellow pilots who've self-assessed themselves and are making our house payments." And Barbara said, every time one sends a check, and pilots were doing that, and some of the flight attendants as well, every time I get a check and I write a letter of thank you, the first thing they say is, "Lyle would have been the first one to do it for me." So that began to help me kind of reshape my own sense of self. I thought I couldn't have been that bad, you know, if that's the reaction. And yet the act that I had committed was so horrific that I was just having so much trouble forgiving myself. And that was really my biggest struggle. I laid awake at night really wanting to die. But that was the first really big struggle that I had. Does that answer your question?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And do we have any other questions? Do we have any? We don't have any from anyone. Oh, we got a question here live.
Thank you for sharing, Lyle. How do you introduce the first step to your sponsees?
Well, you know, there's no written set of instructions. People say, "I work the steps." What does that mean? What does that really mean? There's no universal way to do that. What I do is I do an awful lot of written work. Excuse me, I got just had some oral surgery and I got some stitches coming out, I think. I do a lot of written work. And we talk about the issue of powerlessness. What does it mean? What does unmanageability mean? Do you think you can drink again? If so, how? Are you convinced? You know, when you read chapter 3 more about alcoholism, it says the idea that someday we can drink normally, I'm just paraphrasing, has to be smashed. And I think that's a good way to put it. I can't have any doubt. You know, the first half of the first step is the only part of the entire 12 that has to be worked perfectly. The rest of it is progress, not perfection. We know that. But I ask them, I talk to them. I say, is there any doubt? And usually what I'll do is go through a long, and part of this written part, I'll say, write down all of the difficulties you've had with alcohol, all of the negative experiences you've had. And usually there's family and kids and legal stuff, DUIs, car accidents, whatever. I'll say, God, look at this list. You know, is there any way that you think that you can drink and avoid more of the same? So it's just a long conversation. And I think it's really important from a sponsor standpoint that you do these things face to face, not long distance or anything else like that. And I usually have a feeling that either they're okay on that or that there's going to be problems in the future. You know, we can't predict who's going to get sober and who isn't. I was never right one time when I was working. I worked in treatment for almost 2 years. And the people that I thought were going to make it ended up dying sometimes. Some of the others I didn't think stood a prayer of a chance. I'd walk into an AA or a meeting someplace and they were serving coffee. They were the secretary. I mean, hold it, you know, I just do the best I can, talk to them and see where they are. Just try to meet them where they are.
Thank you for that great question. Is there anybody else, while anybody is building up the courage to ask, I want to give a plug. I saw a movie. I got to share this with you guys. Anybody ever seen Year of the Dog? You? Okay. So I'm watching this movie. I don't know if it was Netflix or Amazon. And my wife just says, you got to come up here and see this movie. I think you need to share this at one of the forums. Maybe have a viewing. Maybe we'll do that here. I don't know. But it took a while to get into what they were there to talk about, but it was about the disease of addiction, about the world of recovery. And once I watched it, I Googled the guy that brought it to life to a film. And one of his dear friends died from an overdose, or I don't know if it was alcoholism or a drug overdose, but his dear friend died and he wanted to give back by making this movie on the world of recovery. So now that I'm thinking about it, I usually don't plug anything when I'm up here, but that's a good flick. And we might bring it here if we can figure out how to do it legally without getting in trouble with Netflix. But is there anybody else that has a question? We've got a question. Go ahead.
Hi, Lyle. My name's Cheryl. I'm an alcoholic recovery. I'm interested in hearing about what the components were to the recovery requirements for the pilot program.
The first thing that happens is that they have to go to at least a minimum 28-day FAA approved treatment center. And most of the treatment centers will meet, not all, but most of the treatment centers will meet those requirements. Then I was never offered that because I had been terminated. But then there's a period of monitoring. It was at first it was 2 years and it went to 3 years. Now they've got a sliding scale on it where you meet with peer monitors who are other pilots that are in recovery. Meet with the chief pilot management people once a month. You're subject to random tests at any point in time 14 a year, minimum 14 a year. And then when you get that notice, you've got, I don't know, I think it's 2 hours, maybe it's as long, maybe it's longer, to get to a nearby facility and be tested. They use SoberLink a lot for international people. I don't know if you know what that is. Where it's a thing where you can blow into it. It takes a photo. It's a highly technical device. It costs a certain amount of money per month. But there's this long process of monitoring and drug testing and meeting with management people. And once a year, you go see a FA designated psychiatrist, and they do an assessment as well. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but they're all doable. Before 1973, before this HIMSS program came into place, any pilot, any licensed pilot who was diagnosed as alcoholic, automatically, without any question, received a lifetime banishment from ever flying again legally. So this HIMSS program has been a real lifesaver. You know, we talk about saving careers, but the careers actually comes behind the family and the children and the life of the person itself. The career is the gravy on top of all of it. But it's a not every. I mean, they average about 92% plus and minus a couple of numbers depending on the year. That's a very high percentage of success.
Thank you.
Great question. And so I don't know if we recorded this session with the expert from the University of Florida, but she researched the parallel program for physicians and healthcare programs. So it was kind of identical to what you referenced in your question and to what Lyle described. She came in from the University of Florida. Do you remember that? Okay. Fascinating. If I got to see if we recorded it. We have a YouTube channel, but I asked her, so she researched this. And while there's no cure for the disease of addiction, the most efficacious is what Lyle just described for pilots and doctors. I think it, and don't quote me on this, but 80 to 90% success rate at curbing relapses. And you heard Lyle say that of 6,000 plus pilots that have been through this, there's never been an instance of a reoccurrence, which is remarkable. So I asked her, why is it so good? I asked her the similar, this is a research scientist. And she goes, great question. We asked them what they thought was good about it. And as I recall, they said the support of my colleagues, you know, other doctors, other pilots, the fact that I had to go in front of a, I'm not using the right term, but a board, you know, regularly, my faith and my community, what we're all doing here tonight. Notice it's not anything that's expensive, okay? It's not anything that's earth-shatteringly different. It's the stuff Lyle described. I'll tell you what she said they didn't like. No one in recovery wants to hear this. And I'm not sure, I have to look into this, but 4 to 5 years of follow-up. You don't get to write scripts a year after it's discovered that you have this disease, that you're addicted to opioids. You got to go through this tried and true process that the research says works. Thank you for that question.
let me make something clear, Mario. I didn't say that no pilot relapsed. I said they were not involved in any kind of an incident or accident.
On a
We have,
plane.
we have a
Yep.
very low relapse rate, and most of the relapses are.
Sorry
maybe-
about that, Lyle. I'm
That's
glad.
okay. One or two drinks, and then that's not all. But and the other thing is that the physicians program came into place after the HIMSS program was patterned directly after it. I've been to a number of doctor workshops, which are very much like the pilots and dentists, and one for the attorneys, several of those. And they were all patterned after the pilot program, which had proven to be so remarkably successful.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Mr. Carey, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Please
Pre-
give him my love.
Yep, thank you. Are there any other questions before we hit the cake? Hard, I hope. Oh. Wow. Okay, Lyle, the question is, why do you think alcoholics, and I would think that you could broadly more paint that people with the disease of addiction have trouble accepting compliments, and you could pretty much paint that. Why do people in general have trouble accepting compliments? But then I know people who have no trouble. They're arrogant accepting compliments. But go ahead, Lyle. That's the question.
Well, I was in the process of typing that. I was going to respond to that, but I don't know. I don't have any absolute answers, but I think that most of us, by the time we get to recovery, we don't just wake up one morning after we've had our first hangover and decide we need to do something about this. By the time we get to recovery, by the time we finally get there, we've gone through an awful lot of negative experiences. Shame with either the wife, the kids, the job, all of these other things. We're accustomed to negativity. We're used to it because we have to lie, cheat, steal in order to continue to do what we want to do, because this is what we want. And so I don't think somebody said one time, if you want some good self-esteem, then do esteemable things. And we have not been doing esteemable things by the time we get to recovery. We've got a long track record that's pretty dark and not good. That's why we have a fifth step and a fourth step where we try to cleanse that, where we try to talk about the things that no one wants to talk about, because we have to do that in order to find a good, comfortable place to live again within us. So I don't think when we get here that we're really geared for any kind of a compliment. And I know even 33 years later, that still registers with me. Oh, I like to hear them. I mean, they're nice. Certainly, who doesn't want to hear something said that's nice? But I also try to make it real clear that while there are a lot of miracles in my story, a lot of them, we had 2 TV movie offers along the way. But while there are so many miracles in the story, the best part of my story, and I really, really mean this, is that I don't get any personal credit for it. I was there. I didn't want to be, but I was there. And the only credit that I can take is for suiting up and showing up once I got to treatment. But the rest of this is purely came from the recovery program that I belong to, the 12 steps, this higher power we talk about, and the gift of grace. Because I had no power. I simply had no power. I couldn't stop what was happening from the moment of the arrest forward, or I sure as heck would have. And when I came out of prison after 424 days of that, I was broke. I had lost everything. I had no power to rebuild anything. I simply had no power to do it. And no one knows that more acutely than I do. I know that. So the best part of my story is that I just did what I was asked to do because I believed And those promises that we read at the meetings, it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. I had no idea what the promises were going to be. I had no idea what they're going to look like. But I hoped that something like that could possibly happen. So it still registers when somebody pays me a compliment. I like it. I don't get red-faced and embarrassed and hide my head. I like it, but I recognize the internal feeling I get when I hear that, because I don't expect it. I really don't expect it.
Thank you for whoever sent that question in. And, you know, I just to piggyback off of what Lyle said, I've noticed, you know, for those of you who have interacted with me in the community, one of the things I always take the time to do is to ask the person receiving the bus pass or the clothing, how's your recovery going? And most of the time people say it's going well. Sometimes they'll share with me that they're struggling, but I always say, congratulations on picking this path. And I add that we do what we do here at Washtenaw FAN because we want you to know your community cares. And part of I'm not a shrink, okay? But I do know that when you have an opportunity to help someone who is struggling this disease, pay them a compliment. Doesn't have to be that they're the world's best father or that they're, you know, that they've solved world peace and hunger, but let them know that you're proud of them for choosing this direction. And you will be making a difference, I assure you of that. So whoever asked that, man, you guys are asking great questions. So are there anybody else? How about one more round of applause for our guest speaker? Lyle, you know, I've only known you for, I think it's been just over 2 years, but seems like I've known you a lot longer, and I love you.
Thank you. Love you too, Mario.
Okay. Thank you so much for doing this and for giving back and for all you do. We appreciate you, sir. And
Thanks
thank
for
you
having
to
me.
all of you for coming up, for coming in. Thank you, Lyle. Okay. Let's
Thanks,
grab
Mario.
some cake and